Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
How do you start one of these things? How do you go into it? Hey, yo, it's me, Alfie, your boy, back at it with another
Oh
geeky gentleman review topic,
my
coming with
gosh.
ya with my main man, that Matt kid. Holler at
What
your
up?
boy.
Yo, yo, yo! We're the best music!
Music. We're reviewing a Studio Ghibli film. They're
Oh my
very.
gosh. Oh my gosh. We're not worthy.
We are not worthy, but who can be worthy these days? Yes. So we're going to be talking about the review topic that Matt picked, Studio Ghibli film. But what film, Matt?
We are talking about the 1992 film, I believe. The 1992 animated Studio Ghibli film, Porco Rosso, with fucking Michael Keaton and Carrie Elwes in the English dub. And that's what we're talking about today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's one thing then. Before we go too deep into the actual content of the thing himself, what made you want to talk about this one?
Well, when we got HBO Max, we didn't know that all of Studio Ghibli's stuff was on there, or at least most of it, anyways. And obviously, everyone has seen, kind of the big five: your Spirited Aways, your Princess Mononokes, and your Kikis, and all that good stuff. But we started looking, and we're just like, wow, we haven't really heard of a lot of these. Like, obviously, we've heard of Nausicaa and Ponyo, but we're just like, wow, what is Porco Rosso? I've never even heard of this. And then we looked at it and we're like, with Michael Keaton? Like, what? And so my wife and I and one of our friends, we just sat down and we're just like, well, we like anime. We like Studio Ghibli. Let's check it out. And we watched it. And, you know, I was just shocked by how much I really enjoyed it. I had never even heard of this film. Watched it entirely on a whim based off kind of the absurdity of the premise and the fact that Michael Keaton was in it, and ended up just kind of fucking adoring it. And so I thought this is not a Ghibli film that gets talked about a lot, and it would be cool to shed some light on it because I think it's really fun.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I had never seen this when you recommended it to me, so it was something where I was just interested to see how it was gonna go. And when I got into watching it, I will admit, first off, what the big thing I'll get out of the way, because like you, I really did enjoy this. The big thing I'll get out of the way because I did watch the dub version. I think that's the weakest point of this film. I think the dub is it's got that early 2000s dub feel to it. This was dubbed by Disney in 2003. And that's the thing that surprised me is that this was dubbed by Disney, because Disney is normally quite good at animation things like and performances feeling natural, and I think because it's anime, the direction for some reason for some everyone has to overreact or like underreact, and like it stood out to me quite a bit. Especially some of Michael Keaton's things is like I could picture him in the booth kind of just saying
Mhm.
something and then moving on. It's like it didn't. A lot of that did stand out to me, and a lot, especially early on, I was like, "Oh no, is it gonna be one of these where it's gorgeous?" But I'm just like, the time period of the dubbing kind of kills it. But as we get further into the film, there are some performances that really do stand out, and I do feel like Michael Keaton won himself over for me. In
Mhm.
the role as we get further into it, but yeah, that the biggest thing I'll say against this film is if you're not used to early anime dubs, it could throw you off for a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the dubbing work and voice direction is quite as good as like Like I think Spirited Away genuinely has a fantastic dub for me
Hmm.
personally. And I also think the same thing of a couple other animes from around kind of the 90s to 2000s, like Cowboy Bebop and stuff like that. Um, this, like Michael Keaton's performance, is kind of surprisingly understated for being a fucking pig, but at the same time, I feel like it kind of fits the tone. It kind of fits that character. I don't know. It worked for me fine. It didn't particularly bother me. I get what you're saying for sure, but it didn't really take away from the experience for me. Mostly because as soon as it started and we had him, flying through the air and going after the bounty hunters, and just this whole world they created of these like seaplane bounty hunters and seaplane pirates. I was just so enraptured by all of it that really I wasn't bothered by any sort of strangeness in the dubbing. But in retrospect, I totally get what you're saying.
Definitely, and I think that might just because it's something that once it's a given, when you're because like again it's Studio Ghibli. If you're not hooked into the world, it's kind of like what are you
Yeah,
what are you doing? It's everything about it is gorgeous. The performances
yeah.
from just how not even from the actors, but how the characters themselves like physically perform. It's not like general anime or even just cartoons where the mouth flaps are the only thing that moves. It's like everyone's jaw is moving in this. Everyone is animated. Everyone's like that opening scene with like the kids is killer. That's one of those most
Oh
memorable
yeah,
ways to kick in a film, just because those little girls kind of steal the show.
yeah, they do.
Those are some baller ass little girls. Like they'd be kicking. They could have saved themselves. I'm sure if they weren't just having enough fun. All of that
Yeah.
is just fantastic. So I totally agree with you there. And again, it's not a deal killer or anything. But it is something where that's the only big negative that I could really come away from with this. The only other thing I think I'll get to when we get to more of the characters and some of the characters maybe coming off a little bit grosser than they need to be. But at the
Mhm.
same time, I think for the character who you're supposed to root against, that's fine. Um, but yeah, just going on to the world we're in right now, Matt. How did you like getting to see? This is going to be one of the only historically based Studio Ghibli films, right?
Well, you've got like The Wind Rises, which is definitely very kind of historically based. But this being so deliberate in its time period, right? Like he was
Mhm.
a World War I fighter pilot. He left as Italy sort of began to change into the more fascist government it would become as we get into World War II. So this sort of in between those two time periods, time frame, portrayed as this sort of, I don't want to say lawless, but this kind of like this world where there's all these pirates and they're all using these planes that would have had to have been fairly recent. I mean, you're talking World War I, planes that are still very early in aviation history. It just created this really fun, memorable world that kind of set this. You kind of had this great dynamic where you're able to tell this story of um, people using these planes to commit crimes and these bounty hunters. So I mean, I really liked it. I liked um, that we were dealing with a character who became disillusioned and left the military, and didn't want to be a part of the rise of that fascist power. Like I like that they don't really make any bones about that. They very clearly come out and state that, and so it's kind of cool to have this sort of fantastical, almost Wild West sort of uh, feel to your world where there's all these bounty hunters and there's all these pirates, but at the same time ground it very much in this historical reality set between these two major world events. There was just something about this that felt so unique and interesting, and it really captured something for me, and I found myself just completely enthralled by the world.
And that's something like I really appreciate the fact that we do the historical setting, but we don't do the trope of and now he's gonna go fight Hitler, and he's
Right,
gonna change
exactly.
everything. It's like that's all background stuff. It's happening, but he doesn't affect a single bit of it. It's just time passes and things change, but the only reason we're in this background is to say something and to discuss these characters and
Hmm.
use that to get across a lot of the themes that we're going in here. But
Yeah.
we're not sacrificing the storytelling of it being original to Fall into making it a war movie or anything. It remains an adventure film that just so happens to be set during this period of change.
Yeah, which is cool because that's just it allows that change of Italy from post World War One getting into pre World War Two. It allows that to just be a really interesting backdrop to the story we're telling, as opposed to being the focal point. And something about that just feels very kind of Ghibli to me. You know, we're telling a story in this sort of fantastical, almost kind of I'm gonna butcher. I don't know how to say this. Like a mythogized version of this period in history, and it's very neat. I really like it. I like the fact that they don't even outright. You know, it's very clear that he left the Italian Air Force after World War One, but they don't necessarily come out and state that specifically. Like they don't. I don't think they ever say like World War One or the Great War or whatever. It's just something that you can kind of pick up and tell. And then they talk about the secret police and the new fascist regime, and it's all there and it's all really interesting, but it never becomes like the focal point. Um, and I mean, I just really like it.
hmm Going on to then character wise, how did you feel about Porco Rosso himself?
I love Porco. Porco Rosso, which is not his real name. I forget what his actual real name is. It's like Marco, I think. Yeah, Marco.
Yes, yeah,
Um,
Marco Pago.
gotcha. Yeah. He's got that line. He's like, I'd rather be a pig than a
That's
fascist.
so fucking good, man.
That is the fucking best line.
The delivery on
Um,
that, like Michael Keaton should have. That should be what people get Michael Keaton to quote. Fuck, I'm Batman.
yeah,
That's his career defining quote right there.
seriously. No, I love it. I love him because he's like he's a fucking pig, but like you and like all the chicks want him and you totally get it. Like he's this fucking noir ass, you know, there he's on the phone with the woman who owns the like restaurant, the bar, and you know, she's like, you know, it's dangerous. You can't go to Milan, you know, you're wanted there. And he's just like, you know, I gotta do what I gotta do. And it's just he's just that kind of archetype of that fucking he's kind of this, you know, goes his own way. And I adore him. He's great. He's such a fun character. He's definitely got this sense of justice inside him, you know, clearly based on like those lines that he gives, like the line about being not wanting to be a fascist. But I like that they don't shy away from the fact that he has his own things he has to get over. Like he clearly doesn't trust women to work on his plane and things like that. So they don't present him as a perfect character. He's someone who you ultimately root for, but he has his own hangups and things to overcome. Um, yeah, I really like Porco quite a bit.
And I thought it was when we first get into the film, and he's just kind of this like badass who's not the stereotypical thing whenever you want to introduce like a kind of like loose cannon character is
Mhm.
where they're like, please, we need you to do this by the rules, and he's like, that'll be double. It's like it's be more expensive if to play nice. Like that kind of stuff is
Yeah.
really fun. But the thing that like immediately kind of hooked me onto this is cool is when he saves when he has the chance to kill the sky pirates,
Yeah.
and he's like, I'll let you go if you release the hostages and give me half the money. Because
Yep.
that's like the swindle, right?
Yeah.
That's like he's making the double hustle, and that the people hiring him don't know that, and like he does spare them, and I think that's such a cool idea that as we go on through the film, and I kind of want to get into this as well. you could maybe chalk this up as the spoilers from this point on, given we've both said we like the film, and people by now should probably go watch it if you haven't. If you haven't watched it but you still want to listen to this, don't worry, we'll just keep going from there. It's one of those things where as you get to go on and see why he's a pig, or at least in my interpretation, why people see him as a pig, but he's not.
Mm.
He's still just a dude. The reason why that is, like, kind of, it's a metaphorical thing that's brought to life of animation,
Yeah.
is because he's walking with that guilt, that survivor's guilt,
Mhm.
that survivor's guilt that has kind of made him go away from being a man to being the guy who will pull the double hustle, which is in him is his morals. That's being a pig. That's being someone who doesn't make a commitment, who doesn't fly in the garden. It's the guy who doesn't make the hard calls. He just lives his life as he is. He doesn't have change, and he doesn't follow. He doesn't have any country or any people to fight for. He fights for himself. Whereas before, he was a man who went to war, and that scarred him. That's such an interesting character to me.
Yeah.
The fact that you get to use animation to, even if you want to say it's literal, he actually did get cussed to be a pig, it still works either way, because the thematic thing is, from that point on, he lost all faith in the world, and just renounced everything. Just at the same time, a fascist power is rising in Italy. A lot of things tie together with that then paired where he finds kind of his soul again, when he meets Theo. All of that, I think, is so good, and like such a smart choice as well, as we get to see what he looked like in the flashback, but
Hmm.
like we get like snippets like twice in the film of what he actually looks like when people actually view him for who he is as a good man. That I think is so good, that if you then rewatch this with that in mind, and you think about, well, yeah, for some reason, like, he's got like the woman Gina, who, like, every pilot falls in love with her. She's like the most beautiful girl in the whole world, and she's got a voice like an angel. And it's like, why is she with this pig? If you're like, well, she probably never stops seeing him that way. She always
Yeah.
sees him as he is, even when he doesn't himself. And he's got like the Leon, but at the same time, the strength of animation and the genius of Miyazaki with this is, some people would say, "Oh, well, you'd probably be more general audience friendly if you just didn't make him a pig and you made it all metaphorical." No, if you make him physically a pig, you also get to have fun visual gags with that metaphor of like his
Yeah.
nose like snorting and like the fight scenes, and just again, it's just cool to see. He looks like he's Raphael with like the trench coat and like
He does.
like he's got the classic person hiding in New York, like The Thing or something. Like, I love that trope, that the anamorphic character just wearing the long trench coats with the hat instantly makes me like your thing. So the fact that they do that, but they pair it with such a real human story, I thought was fantastic, and it made me like Michael Keaton's performance more as we learnt more about him.
Yeah.
Because at first I was like, oh, this is really understated for the animation. I don't think it fits. The casting, like the anime, I haven't listened to the sub, but just how he was animated, you'd expect like big belly laughs and all of that. But then Michael Keaton was very quiet the whole time. Very, very just Michael Keaton, as he does.
Mm.
But as we go on and we see that, well, that, yeah, he looks to us and the audience and to other people as this big belly laughing pig. But in reality, he's still just a dude. That, I thought, just made me kind of click as like, oh no, that's perfect casting that. Because it's meant to
Mm.
be visually confusing for you. That the voice doesn't
Yeah.
match the body.
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me a lot of some of the other Ghibli films that have kind of done that sort of thing. Like if you watch Howl's Moving Castle, and you've got the girl who gets cursed to be an old woman, but then occasionally, people see her as the young girl, just depending on, what's happening in the emotions in the story and things like that. It allows you to have these really cool and interesting moments where people see him briefly for what he is, because that part of him shines through. And you even get that ambiguity at the end when Theo kind of gives him the kiss, and we don't actually see his face. But Curtis, or yeah, I think it's Curtis who he's with, is clearly able to see something, and he's telling him like, "Hey, turn around." And so it gives you just a lot to play with, both thematically and visually. And it's something that, like you said, it works so well in animation, and I don't think that it's something you could have gotten away with in live action, especially not in '92, maybe now. But it works so well. And yeah, Michael Keaton's performance, I agree with you that when you first hear it, it's kind of a surprise just because it's not what you're expecting from this character. But as you live with it, it does become perfect for who Porco is, for who Marco is, because he's still definitely in there.
And I think that's always a powerful trick when a storyteller can get you to understand the character on a physical, like he's just fun to look at. He's fun to fly in the pain. That red plane with him in the scarf and the glasses, that's an iconic visual. That's just great character design.
Yep.
Which at the same time, he doesn't get lost in that. You can still understand him as the human beyond that. And when like Gina's like just thinking about like the when the man who I love will land in this airplane, and like she's just thinking about all the lost loves in her life, and the pain in her voice, even when we first see them together and they have that drink together after hours in the bar.
Mm-hmm.
That's some powerful stuff that you'll be like, ah, man, he's a goofy fucking pig. I can't take any of this seriously. But you do. You just take it as completely real. And I think that's easily something that could have gone wrong. And I don't know if that's just given, again, Studio Ghibli, they know what they're doing, so I'm assuming that's something they managed to nail perfectly. But I would be curious to
Yeah.
see if there were any people who just couldn't get past that.
It walks this perfect line of absurd enough that you still kind of find yourself amused by it. Because yeah, he's like this pig who walks in, and it's this fucking pulp adventure story where he's having a drink and he's talking about pirates, but he's a fucking pig. And it kind of reminds me of like, and you brought up Raphael, and I think that's actually kind of a good comparison because it almost reminds me of like the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles run, because it walks that perfect balance of, we're going to play it straight, and we're going to treat these characters almost as though they're not walking, talking animals, but they are. And so there's this inherent absurdity that gives this kind of levity and sense of whimsy and kind of ridiculousness to the story. But then they never veer from the tone of this like old school pulp adventure story. So like it so perfectly finds that balance. And I love it. I was never taken out, or never didn't take what was happening as seriously as the movie wanted me to take it. It knew how to walk that fine line of using that premise to be silly and to be fun and to be ridiculous, while also never losing kind of the heart of what the story they're telling is, and without losing that this is a real character that we're working with.
Moving on then from Marco to the next main player of this story. One thing I have to say, just for anyone who knows me on this channel, is just everyone knows I laughed instantly the moment this name comes up, and I think you could recognize that as well. Matt. Is that when her grandfather is named Piccolo?
Yes.
And he's like, I gotta go see Piccolo. And when this walking, talking pig says, I gotta go see Piccolo, I was like, did Oolong get some fucking balls? Like, what is happening? Like, this was like, I was just imagining him. At this point, all bets are off. I was half expecting just a Namekian to show up, so that would have been a very different film, but probably I would have even liked it even more. With that out of the way, when we are introduced to Piccolo's granddaughter, Theo, 17 years old, who is designs and fixes up his plane and then goes on this adventure with him. I've just got to say, she stole the fucking film for me.
Oh my god, yes,
Theo
absolutely.
is the
Theo is incredible.
We stand. Like, Theo
Yeah.
is a
Yeah.
fantastic character where
Mhm.
she's just boundless energy and boundless positivity when you first meet her. She's always coming at everything with a go-getter attitude. People are saying some pretty sexist shit to her, but she never
Yep.
she never like curses at him or spits back at him, which she has every right to do, she it just blows right over her head. She doesn't even feel it, and she just carries on with just, I'm so excited to do all this. This is so fun. And with an adventure film, it's always so, you need to have that character who's having even more fun than you, because you can put
Hmm.
yourself in those shoes, and it makes it so much easier to remember the thrill of everything you're seeing. Like when Porco's in the plane and he's doing all the dogfights at the beginning, they smartly already have that with the little girls who are already
Yep.
loving it, and that makes you get more invested. They keep that going throughout the whole thing by having Theo be here to be that like normalcy, the fish out of water, the Luke Skywalker on her adventure. But what really stuck out to me, that made me go from, I really like this character, to wow, I love this character, is where she does this big stand up to the guys, and she saves Marco's life, and she tells everyone to, this is how it's gonna go, and yeah, you can marry me, whatever. I have total faith that he's gonna nail it, and this is just
Hmm.
everything that's gonna happen. Get lost. And they do. They are terrified of her, and she stands her ground, and they all walk away. And everyone's like, "Whoa, holy crap, you just did that!" But then she just starts shaking, and she isn't like. It's hard to describe it, but it felt so real. It felt like she
Yeah.
just got such a rush from it, and now she's on the come down, and all the adrenaline's still in her, and her heart's beating, and so she just goes for a swim. I need to just do something, get everything out because my heart is racing. That
Yeah.
to me was just like, oh my god, I can't remember a time I've ever seen that with a character, and that just like legit touched me, because that's so, yeah. I've been in like courtrooms, and after you do your best argument ever, and the doors are closed, and you're just like, oh man, you have to just, you're shaking, and you're pumped up, and like that really hit me on a personal level. I was just like, oh my god, I love this character.
Yeah. No, she's great. She delivers that speech with such conviction, and you buy it. You 100% buy it that she is able to turn these guys around and say, yeah, I mean, I lost it when she's going on. She's like, where's your honor? You're supposed to be seaplane pilots. This is not how you are supposed to be. And she sort of takes the world the way she sees it and shares it with them, and they kind of see the world through her eyes, and they want to almost live up to what she expects of them.
Hmm.
And it's delightful, and it's charming, and it's so fun, and you totally buy it because of how kind of exaggerated and ridiculous the world already is set up to be, based on like that opening scene with all the little girls going crazy inside the pirate plane. And then, yeah, to have her have that moment of coming down from that high, that adrenaline high. It's not something you really see in fiction. It's not, we never acknowledge that people need that moment. And so I 100% agree with you. I didn't have that personal connection with it, obviously. But that's really cool that it hit you in that way. And it's definitely a standout scene in the entire film for sure.
And that's something which again, she just remains charming throughout the whole thing. That's kind of like her moment where she peaks. After that, we do kind of move focus, and it's of her own volition, but we do kind of do the trope of like winning to save the girl and everything. But I mean,
Mhm.
at the same time, the time period this is in, the kind of vibes it's going for, I think it does that the best that you possibly can do. It's done respectful to her.
Yep.
All the people going after her are deliberately portrayed as buffoons. None of
Mhm.
these guys are cool. They're all just losers, and all of that. I think just keeps in that kind of Saturday morning kind of kid.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pulp adventure film, so like of
Mhm.
course the you're trying to win the girl, and on some level there's that's a classic storytelling thing, and like yes, we've tried to move past that, but there's certainly nothing wrong with paying homage to that time frame and kind of pulp adventure stories. But what works about it is exactly like you said, they turn it on its head by making her the one who puts herself in that situation purposefully. And so it's a way to kind of pay homage to that kind of classic pulp adventure, get the girl, all that stuff, but while still keeping in with what this movie is doing, because we've had lots of moments in the film, not just from the bad guys, but from Porco himself, of having to deal with sexist attitudes and things like that. And so it's a great way to do both of those things. We get to have that fun story where you've got to rescue the girl, but we also get to kind of tackle that trope a little bit and at least try to turn it on its head. It's one of those rare instances where I think the movie does kind of manage to have its have its cake and eat it too. I think it works really well.
Definitely. But it was something that I'd be remiss not to bring up to mention. But I agree with all your points, precisely of why it actually does work in the end. But yeah, all of that with Theo and Marco, their relationship is one of those like tried and true, gruff old guy with the young go getter gal is kind of always easy to for some reason that combination is always dynamite as like the father figure who kind of learns his soul through meeting this young adventurer, and then she kind of gets to learn lessons from this guy who's seen that all and been there all. Like for some reason that's been done to, especially recently, like that's in everything, but it'd be hard to say it's a formula that doesn't work. So I feel, and especially for the time period that this came out, it was certainly hadn't been done nearly as much as it is now. So I feel like that's something that works really, really strongly. Moving on to kind of the other main characters, how did you feel about the American actor and kind of the main villain of this, Curtis?
Yeah, so Curtis, played by fucking Carrie Elwes of A Princess Bride fame, he's a lot of fun. He's definitely kind of a scumbag for sure, but I like his presence in the movie a lot because he's this really fun foil for Porco. Their dogfight is just insanely fun visually, just on a pure spectacle level. But as a character, he's a great foil. He's almost kind of what Porco, I guess, kind of sees himself as. Like, he is the guy who doesn't have who only fights for himself. He is the guy who only cares about money and things like that. Whereas, Porco, I think, definitely kind of sees himself that way, and he is that way to a degree, but he still has this sense of justice that Curtis doesn't have, because Curtis is fully willing to hire his services out to anybody. And it's also interesting because he's drawn to be very attractive, and he's got vanity to the point where he's even trying to become, a famous Hollywood actor. He's this very vain character to sort of contrast with Porco, who looks like a fucking pig. So not only is he fun as a villain, but he works as kind of a foil and sort of an opposing force for Porco to deal with. So I quite like him. I like him a lot.
I think he's fun. I always like the archetype of kind of the buffoon who's kind of always love struck to the point of being creepy.
Yep.
But it's played, and again it's in that like Saturday morning cartoon kind of, like when he says I want to marry you, I don't believe he wants to sleep with these women. I believe no, he just really wants to marry people.
Yeah.
He's kind of got that kind of vibe to him, where he's just a hopeless romantic, because again he obviously tries to kill Marco throughout this film, but at the same time it always kind of gives that Team Rocket kind of vibe. Nothing in this film, although we are in, like we say, the fascist state is rising, for some reason the tone never loses itself. We never get out of this family adventure film, which I think is a very fine line to walk, but they do it massively. They strut it, they don't walk it.
Yep.
See, I think that's fun. I love the imagery at the end, as when that whole last fight is kind of amazing. Just because, like, at first when they were just doing a dogfight, I was like, oh, okay, yeah. How much else could you show with the planes? And it feels like they realized that as well. So they just said, well, we don't want to do a plane fight anymore. We just want to have them chuck shit. And now it's like, all right, now they're gonna land get in the water and just start throwing hands. And I thought that was just so. And then like when when they like cut and then we cut back and then like Theo's got like the chair ready. He sits down and like she gets the liquor. He's like, "You're gonna get him, chap." And I'm like, "Whoa, holy shit!
Yep.
This is the coolest looking thing. We're just in Rocky now."
Yep.
And then Curtis's face is all swollen. So like at this point they both look like pigs.
Yep.
I think that is fantastic. I think that whole climax is not only emotionally satisfying when we get the final like big punch and we he comes out of the water first and he's the one who makes it. But I also feel like it's kept in a way that when they do at the end agree, it's like, you know what, we're gonna distract the army, we're gonna distract the navy so everyone else can get away. You buy it. You buy it that this guy just had a personal grudge, but at the end of the day, he's not. He's an asshole, but he's not evil, right? Like he's just
Right.
he's an antagonist. He's not a villain, and I think that was fantastic. The ending of this, where it's again you see like the beautifully drawn movie poster with his like a very realistically drawn woman, but like he's got the big ass anime chin still. I thought that was so funny. Like all of that I really liked with Curtis. He's what he needed to be for this film. There's not much else you can really say about him. He serves his role quite well. I guess the last main member of the cast before if we want to talk about like memorable side characters, because this film does have a few of those.
Yeah.
What about Gina? Like kind of the big love interest. The if we're going by an old pulp adventure film, she's kind of like the singer who's like, oh, I've known many men and they've all died, like that kind of trope, which I think is again is just as kind of like just as much as the guy who comes in to the bar with the one-liner and the bad experiences is like there's such a noir kind of like, yes. It's so cool every time someone does it. Whenever she's just like, yes, and then I lost another and I don't have any more tears to cry. Like that's such a classic line.
Yeah. No, I love her. She's great. I mean, every character in this fulfills their role so perfectly. And Gina's absolutely great. You know, I love just the idea that she, you know, runs this bar where, you know, pirates and bounty hunters alike can kind of show up, and she's this kind of world weary. She's known people who have died, and she's you know, she has this kind of almost true love in Marco. She's really great. I love when Curtis tries to propose to her and tries to woo her, and she's just fucking not having it. She's really, you know, she's a great character. I mean, I love everything about how they handle her and the bar and everything like that. And it's clear that she has these strong feelings for Marco, and that she sees more in him than he sees in himself, which is something that I love. You know, she sees the man under the pig, whereas Marco doesn't always want to accept himself for who he is and accept that, you know, he can be more. Whereas she sees all that in him, and it's all very classic and it's great. And I mean, it nails those archetypes so beautifully.
Definitely, I think classic is the perfect word to use here. Everything about this film screams classic. Something I want to gush over for a minute is the animation. Specifically something that just we don't get anymore, and I kind of get it because it doesn't need to. We've got to the point now where we're so good with it we don't need to, but it's so rare to find hand-drawn water. That has such a satisfying ass look to it when they crash on the waves and you see the waves go over them and their hair's like going, and but then it's just like it's that ultimate kind of anime thing of like you get drenched by the water but you're going so fast your hair's already dry, like everything about that when they're going through the canal. And
that whole scene when they're trying to escape from the secret police, and it's like a car chase in a plane in a canal because it's a seaplane. It's so cool,
and they're going so fast as well. It's not like we got to get it running, and that's the big thing. And once it gets running, then we're going to lift off. But that's what most films do, simply because you can't shoot that. You can't have that plane running down a canal so fast. You're going to kill someone. Like, unless you CGI that shit, it's not happening. With animation, you can, like, no, get that thing blasted, and it's still not taking off. And it's, like, ducking over the other boats and everything, all of that. I loved how that looked. Miyazaki's probably crowning achievement, I think, as a animator, or at least as the director of these animations, is A, how he makes food look, which we don't really get a taste of in this film. Haha, pun intended. But B is how he makes machinery look. So him doing a film just focused on look how cool planes are. I'm like, yes, let's just go. Just show me how they build these planes. Show me these diagrams. Just give me. I could watch that scene of when they're just like, when they like, you see the plane and they just spray paint it the red, and that's all drawn. And I'm just like, how? That's so satisfying. That's just such a primal artist part of me, seeing that red go on that plane and it looking so glossy. That's just like aesthetic.
And it's also so cool because not only do you get all this great machinery, but it's set in this time period. So like where I live, there's an Air Force museum, not like 5 minutes from me. And you can walk through it and see all these different planes, and they even have some of the decommissioned Air Force One planes now that you can just walk through. But that period of like World War I to World War II, the variety in the design and shape of the plane is so fascinating. It was at a time period where it almost feels like we were still trying to figure this shit out and figure out what actually works best for these types of aircraft. And so the time period that this is set in lets you not only get these classic sort of World War I to World War II kind of biplane aesthetics going, which always looks fantastic. But because you have that mixed with the fact that it's kind of a more heightened world, it's in animation, you get these kind of wildly different and interesting looking planes, like when all the pirates are kind of teamed up and you get to see all their different planes and all their different ships, and the way that all their planes are built and designed, and each one's a little bit different as to where the engine is, things like that. So, I mean, just aesthetically, 10 out of 10. I mean, everything looks so gorgeous, and the dog fights themselves, of course, don't disappoint. And a good dog fight, be it in this or in Star Wars or in anything, a good dog fight is always just a joy to watch as long as it's done well, and the ones here are fantastic.
Definitely. All of that I think paired together with how good the narrative here is as well, gives you something that you can really like. I'd be happy to rewatch this. Like, part of me as I was going through this is just like, oh man, I kind of just want to watch the sub version now just to compare it.
No.
But I didn't have time. But like, I definitely want to do that one day. I think this is something where it never overstays its welcome. It's exactly the right amount of time you wanna spend on this. Every moment feels like, yes, everything leads to the next. And we're not ever we have moments of downtime, but we never have filler. We never have something where it's like padding, or we have to wait because the animation budget and we don't want to do it. It's like, no, every scene is serving a purpose, and every scene, even if it is just people hanging around talking, no one's still, no one's static, everything's moving, everything's in motion. And I think that's such a beautiful display of not only confidence in the material, but confidence in the production quality. Like, this is Ghibli at their fucking zenith, where they're just blasting on all cylinders, and like, look how big our swinging animation dick is. That I think is all great. One thing I do want to touch on, just narratively, given where we end and we kind of do such a big jump, it's kind of left in the air. There are hints, and I wonder if you picked up on the hints that were there about the fate. But where do you think Marco ends up?
Well, I'm kind of pulling it up on HBO right now so I can double check. But I believe you can see his plane.
Yes,
at Gina's place in her garden. Yeah. and I'm remembering, and I'm actually kind of replaying it. I'm remembering that scene where it's at the end, and Porco's like, let's go ahead and draw them away, and Curtis is like, sure thing, and he looks over, and we don't see Porco's head, and that's the last time we see him. We don't see his face. And I love that ambiguity. That ambiguity is so great, and we don't really know what's going to happen to him, and we can kind of leave that up in the air. But you do definitely see his ship, or at least something that looks very much like his ship, in Gina's. I certainly hope that's where he ended up. I certainly hope that he found that sort of self-worth and that forgiveness of himself that he was sort of lacking, and that Gina was always able to see in him. So I do think he ended up there, but it's ambiguous enough that you can kind of interpret it a lot of different ways.
Definitely, and I always love that about these kind of films. Me and Ian kind of talked about that with Sword of the Stranger. Is the ending of that film is very much ambiguous in the same kind of way, where there's hints to if you do want to have a definitive ending, fans like that who just hate ambiguity can have that, but at the same time there's enough there where like, well, is it really? And like you can kind of go wild with your theories if you want to. I'm kind of in your camp. I definitely like the idea that he the pig, the crimson pig, finally did die. But he came back as Marco, and spent. That's why they could never catch him. They could never find him, because he retired. He went out and he had his last big adventure. I think that's a really cool idea. But one, I think I want to bring this up because it's an interesting bit of info I found just as I was doing research for like behind the scenes thing. There was a sequel plan to this.
Oh, was there?
Yeah.
Huh.
Miyazaki was like in 2011, so I think it's been long since cancelled, but you never know. These things do take quite a while to get made, so you never know. Like, this could be surprisingly a timely video, depending on circumstances. You never know, but Miyazaki said when he was on the press for Ponyo, if that, and his next few films. So even at the time, he said it wasn't going to be immediate. His next few films do well. The sequel to this was going to be his next project, and it was going to be set during the Spanish Civil War, with Marco as kind of like the a old veteran.
Oh.
So kind of like Logan, but with Porco Rosso.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah, that'd be interesting. I mean, Porco Rosso is one of those things where I'm like, I don't know that it needs a sequel, but that's mostly just because I don't really know what I would do with a sequel.
Yeah, for sure. This is already kind of like what sequels normally are, where the hero, you almost want a prequel.
Right, exactly, of like him being in the military and leaving and things like that. But yeah, I mean I mean I'd be down. I mean, this is a world I would love to see more of. I mean, truthfully, being 100% with you, when I was watching this, when I think back on Studio Ghibli films, when it came to the ones that were more just kind of for kids and not as kind of weighty as something like Princess Mononoke, Kiki's Delivery Service was always the one I went to as like, that's my favorite of the like really kind of lighthearted ones. This one has probably unseated it for me.
Oh, nice.
This came out of nowhere and just struck such a chord for me, that I adore this movie with every fiber of my being. And it's I would certainly be happy to revisit the world. I don't know what you would do with, like, I don't know if Porco would still look like a pig to the audience or what exactly. I just don't know what you would do with a sequel to it. But hey, I mean, if Miyazaki has the inspiration to do it, I'm sure he's got a story worth telling.
Definitely. Like, I'd almost be like, I don't know, is Theo an animal now? Because she inherited the plane and she's the head of this company now, but now she's decided to go on an adventure or something. Like, you can take it in many different directions, and who knows if that core idea, that's like the pitch, right? And these things, you go into production and the pitches turn out very, very different. Like, this originally was going to be just a straight adapt. It is an adaptation of an existing manga, but it was going to be just like a 2 TV flight movie short, like 20 minutes of just flight action. that as they got into it, just expanded. And I think that happens a lot with these kind of projects, is where you think something's going to be good, but as you get deeper and deeper and deeper into something, it just, your brain kind of explodes with like potential of all the things you can do, and so the scope of it gets much much bigger. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened, if there was an eventual sequel. Even if there isn't, it doesn't need it. This is perfect as it is. Like, you
Yeah.
don't need this. This finishes everything up. This wraps up all the character arcs beautifully. You're not left with any loose ends. You're just left with that nice feeling after you finish a film. You're like, oh well, I wonder where they ended up. Like, the world is continuing without you, but you don't have to pop in to see them. But maybe one day you'll turn your eyes to it again. So I always love that feeling, and I'm very glad you recommended this for me to experience that. Unless you've got anything, this is a shorter episode, but I
The
feel like
movie's short. It's an hour and a half. I mean, it's yeah. There's kind of like it's boy, how do I say this without it sounding like I'm slighting the film? It's kind of a simple film, right? Like, there's not a ton to dig into here. You know, it's not like Mononoke, where you've got you know, the differing sides of this conflict and their ideologies, and really going into it. It's a very simple, straightforward story that's just beautifully executed on all fronts. And like, yeah, there's obviously thematic stuff to talk about here, but nothing that's like overly deep. And that's certainly not a mark against the film, but it's just a perfect little experience. You know, it's almost something you don't need to dig all too deeply into necessarily. It kind of it knows exactly what it wants to be. It sets out to just give you that fun adventure, and it does it wonderfully.
There's always a misconception, I think, with people where they think simple as an insult, and certainly in recent years it's become that. To be fair, ever since the use of the word, calling someone simple has never been nice.
Yeah.
But I think it misses a trick where so many people, especially young writers, or writers with like a chip on their shoulder, try and overcomplicate things just so that it seems smart. Pardon me. Just so they seem that they're talking about something. They'll throw in like tons of literary references, like beat you over the head with something, just so they, like a Zack Snyder film or something, right? Comments, say what you want with that, but that's the clearest example I have of like someone who is desperately trying to seem mature because they are afraid of the story they're telling being seen as simple or family friendly or something like that. I think a
Right.
true skilled storyteller, like a master of the craft, is when all the bullshit, all the tricks, all the cheats just fade away, and you get someone who can just tell a beginning, middle, and simple story with such perfect execution. It's like, you know, in like old samurai films, like you're talking like you get the big, loud, brash young samurai who's flailing around his sword and doing all these tricks, and the master just walks up, unsheaths his sword, one cut, puts it back, done. Right? That's how it feels when like I watch a movie like this. It feels like a master just come up, unsheathed his sword, and then put it back, and is now continuing on his journey. Like, it is the coolest way I can explain that, but it's
Yeah.
how it feels. It's just like, yep, this was a classic, perfect, almost like fairy tale-esque story. And
Yep.
if you can ever get to the point as a writer when you can say you can write fairy tales, holy crap. That's some
Yeah.
weighty stuff. So yeah, I'm in tons of agreement. I think Miyazaki has shown that, like, again, in previous films, he can go deeper, he can do things. And this, again, tons of references to actual important historical things, but they're never at the forefront. They're just help there to build the world and build the characters and service the story, rather than window dress it, right? To have to hide hide any problems. There are no problems here. This is just craft at work. And I think that's always a beautiful sight to see, a master at work.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't recommend it enough to anyone who hasn't checked this one off of their Studio Ghibli. Is it Ghibli or Ghibli? I really don't know.
I have no clue. Anyone in the
Okay.
comments, please let us know.
I've pronounced it both ways, so both groups of people will be mad at me.
That's just one of those things where it's really kind of hard to touch. All right, I don't have anything more to say, so I guess
Yep.
we'll just move on to recommendations. Oh, like not recommendations, but like ratings.
Yeah. 100%. This is some of Studio Ghibli's. I think it's some of their best. I mean, for how fantastic this is, the fact that I'd never heard of it is a crime. It is phenomenal, and definitely go check it out. I give it 5 out of 5. Anti-fascist pigs.
Yeah. This is one of those very, very enjoyable things of Geeky Gentleman, where me, in my basic bitch limited tastes, rarely get to venture out of my wheelhouse. Doing this has enabled me to find more stuff like this that are our cool friends, and makes me want to go and marathon all the other stuff as well, just to catch up and get what I'm missing. So I feel like this ranks up pretty high for me as well. This was a really, really fun time to watch. So I'm going to give this 5 out of 5 dead boyfriends who are pilots.
Yep.
But maybe
I
one
mean,
of
yeah.
them will land in my garden. Which is, I mean, as sexual metaphors go, come on, you're putting it on a bit thick.
A little bit. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm gonna forget the experience of watching this for the first time for a while. I mean, literally, it was just my wife and my friend just like sitting at his house after we had just spent the day moving a shitload of his furniture into his new apartment. We're just like we're dead tired. Let's just watch a movie. What's this stupid movie about a pig? Sure, why not? And then just the three of us fucking grinning ear to ear through the whole thing, just being charmed as hell. I mean, it was kind of magical. I mean, it was great. I'm not gonna forget my experience with this anytime soon, and it's definitely up there for me in Ghibli films.
Okay. Next time, we got a discussion topic.
Oh boy.
Okay, this will be a fun one. Yeah, another one we probably couldn't have done with Ian. I want you to go away and come back, and we're gonna discuss what if we were in the world of Pokemon, what our gym would be, and what our team would be.
My fucking god. Oh.
And I want you
shit.
as well to think about
Yes.
what the theme of your gym would be and like the puzzle.
Okay. Ooh. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
So
Okay.
that should
I'm
be
gonna
a
have
fun
to
one.
yeah, that'll be fun. Just kind of talking about Pokemon. That'll be cool. Does Ian not play Pokemon?
No.
Oh my god.
I don't think
what a
so. At
fucking
least.
loser.
I think that kind of, I don't know. It's something where I've never seen him talk about it, so I'm not too sure.
Oh my god, Ian doesn't play Pokemon. Fucking lame-o.
What a
Ugh.
fucking narc, man. Virgin, am I right?
Oh, this will be fun. This will be cool. I've actually been meaning to pick back up the third gen remakes because I was playing those recently. So yeah, that'll be fun.
Awesome. Well, look forward to that. And until next time, we have been your geeky gentlemen, and we will be. I am the champion of the oppressed. It's been a bit.
Yeah, and I'm the Sonic Erotica lover.
And we will be discussing things.
Dum, dum, dum.